Hey all, welcome to an episode of Analysis of a Crime with CD. As I always say, when we're always talking about cases from Delphi to now the Idaho quadruple homicide, I always say go back to the beginning of any case. Go back to the early days of an investigation and see what was being talked about. So I'm going to go over an article that could fit a theory as to why Bryan Kohberger was in the area and how he might have encountered one of the females there, and some type of maybe infatuation occurred to blatant stalking. But as we do know from the affidavit, and I'll read that piece to you, the records for the 8458 phone show the 8458 phone utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to the area of 1122 King Road on at least 12 occasions prior to the November 13th, 2022 murders. So what was the reason for it? Well, let's go back to what the cab driver said when he was interviewed. The section of Moscow, Idaho, where 4 University of Idaho students were murdered earlier this month, is a known party spot, says local taxi driver, who added that that's where people go to get drugs. Our reporters on the ground just days after the murders could hear loud revelers next door to the home where investigators continue searching for clues. Speaking with the Idaho Tribune, a local taxi driver claims that the area where the 4 University of Idaho students were murdered is a known party spot, adding that that's where people go to get drugs. I used to drive people there all of the time. It's a known party spot. Everyone knows that's where people go to get drugs. Then Jeremy Reagan, who I have interviewed twice on here, he was interviewed by them, and he's Jeremy Reagan, a law student who lives near the home where the murders took place, told Fox News that the victims would often have gatherings, and added that people went in and out of the house pretty frequently. There were parties that were kind of loud. Now, no, Jeremy didn't say that this was a known drug location, but in my career in law enforcement, cab drivers know what's going on. They know the deal. So what is my theory? Well, this is just the theory. This is by going back to the beginning and just trying to piece together how did Bryan initially encounter one of the girls, to we know when he was going to commit the crime that he had his phone turned off in airplane mode so his device couldn't be tracked later on. Now we know he was there 12 times at least, and that's when his phone was pinging in the area. Now, the question is, we know Bryan suffered from a drug addiction. Even one of his friends who used to do heroin with him came out over the last week and, spoke about doing heroin with him. Now, there's no way, it would be very hard for Bryan to go through all the schooling he went through and be able to function in school, also teach a class for his doctorate program, being a heroin addict. That's very hard. And again, this is all allegedly, but was he using something else? Was he, we know we know college kids, a lot of kids will, get their hands on Adderall and abuse Adderall. It's made of methamphetamine salts. When used in a higher dose, or somebody that doesn't have ADD, ADHD, it can really, remember what his neighbor said, the one that lived downstairs from him. He was up at all hours of the night, vacuuming, cleaning. There was a lack of sleep there. You're seeing a habit, even from his device. Everything was up late at night. Very hard to function all day long, being up all night. Teaching a class, grading papers. To get your doctorate is not easy. That's not an easy feat at all. So what was Bryan doing? Did somebody tip Bryan off when he was out one night that, hey, so-and-so over here near King Road, Queen Road, they sell, Adderall or blah, blah, blah. So was Bryan, in that area? Because remember, it was August 21st. He was ticketed by Corporal Payne for, driving with no seatbelt in that area. He was right there. That was August 21st. So did Bryan have somebody, and I'm not saying it's from 1122 King Road. I'm not saying it's, that's one of the victims, but was he, using that area to come up with narcotics, and abusing, Adderall. And that's how he, maybe Kaylee was walking her dog or outside playing, and he, sparked up a conversation. Something occurred where he became infatuated with at least one of the females in that house. We also know that, Stephen Calvez, Kaylee's dad, he's been given, important pieces. And we now know that, I guess he was already told that Bryan's device connected to the Wi-Fi. How does a phone connect to the Wi-Fi in a house? When your iPhone's on and you have Wi-Fi on, which is pretty standard, the newer phones will actually try to connect to any Wi-Fi in the area. So yeah, I mean, you're within 100 feet of a house, your device will try and connect to that router. And when the router is searched, when they go in and analyze the data, you get the IP addresses of the devices that are trying to connect to it. So that's just another piece of the puzzle showing how close he was to the home. And I'm sure it wasn't November 13th when it connected, but he's been there 12 times that we know of. 12 times when his phone was on. What was he doing there? Was that his spot to come up with Adderall or another substance that can assist you in functioning at a higher level, to abusing that drug? We just don't know. But I do believe, I've had many cab drivers that gave a lot of information when I was doing narcotics. And, they know the pulse of an area. They know what's going on in that area. So I take this as pretty factual of what this cab driver said. So, I mean, listen, I know law enforcement doesn't want to really talk about that, of what could be going on in that area. But let's be honest, you have that whole, whatever that is, you could say maybe a quarter mile of all college kids. With college, there's drugs. That's just the way it goes. From weed all the way up. And, over the last, I would want to say 10, 12 years, methamphetamine has, even before that, maybe 2005-ish, the West Coast really started, from Vegas and then out, and you take it outward with methamphetamines. So, yes, Adderall is a prescription drug, but it is heavily abused in college. That's a known fact. So the question arises to me, what brought Bryan into that immediate area? Was it either seeing one of the girls out at maybe even the corner club and following them home, or what fits better? What fits this puzzle, more so? That he was in that area looking to maybe had a dealer in that area that he was getting his Adderall from that he was using. I mean, listen, people get prescriptions from it, and at the same time, they use more than they're prescribed. So they need to find a secondary source. So that's my big question. And, I've been waiting until, I always don't put things out immediately. I like to, let things settle in, but I have more coming out on different pieces, different theories. But I do think that this theory holds weight. And I believe that, we're gonna learn more as to what Bryan was doing in that area, at least 12 times that we know of. And there's just more to come. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. At the end, I'm going to have the piece play where Mr. Goncalves speaks about Bryan's phone attempting to connect to the Wi-Fi router. And that doesn't, and let's be honest, that does not mean he was in the home at one time. It doesn't mean he knew the password to the router. iPhones, even, Android devices will attempt to connect to routers in the area. That's why if you're anywhere out, you'll see pop up on your phone, free Wi-Fi, do you want to connect? Your phone already made somewhat of a contact with that router. Not that it's signed into it, but that's just what phones do. They bounce off of routers. That's just normal, So let me know in the comments your thoughts on this, but I do think it has some weight. I think this taxi driver, I know he's remaining anonymous, but I believe he knows exactly, or she I believe it's a he, knows exactly what he is talking about and knows the pulse of that area and knows what's going on.
Probable cause affidavit released Thursday lays out DNA, cell phone records, and video surveillance investigators say link Washington State University grad student Bryan Kohberger to the crime scene. Investigators say they found a knife sheath next to Maddie's body, and the sheath had DNA matching Kohberger's father's DNA.
It was worth the wait, and they had a lot of evidence to show for that. So we're on the right track, and there's still a long ways to go, but it feels good. It feels good to be where we are right now.
The affidavit also said Kohberger's phone pinged near the girl's home on King Road in Moscow at least 12 times in the months leading up to the murders.
And close enough that he was touching their Wi-Fi. That his phone was touching their Wi-Fi.